to discuss NRC's work. First and foremost, NRC is focused on our mission of protecting public health and safety. Yet the agency faces a different environment than what was expected just a few years ago when substantial new reactor construction was anticipated and no licensees had yet announced plans to shut down any reactors. To meet our responsibilities now and in the future, we need to enhance the efficiency, effectiveness, and agility of the agency. Toward this end, the Commission has approved implementing a number of the Project AIM recommendations. This is a critical effort for NRC that will continue to require significant Commission and staff attention in the coming months and years. While we take steps to increase the agency's efficiency and agility, we need to ensure that NRC also maintains its focus on its ongoing safety work. Currently, 5 new reactors are being built in the United States, and 5 reactors recently ceased operations and are entering decommissioning. At the construction sites, NRC is conducting oversight to ensure that the new plants are built safely and meet regulatory requirements. Meanwhile, the NRC staff is beginning a rulemaking to take a fresh look at a number of decommissioning issues. NRC continues to address post-Fukushima safety enhancements and lessons learned. Progress has been made in several areas, but we recognize that more work remains to be done. NRC also is responsible for having an efficient and effective licensing process for new designs and facilities. While NRC continues its work on pending applications for new reactors, we need to be ready to accept and review applications submitted for new technologies. NRC is already reviewing an application for a new production facility for medical isotopes and anticipates additional applications of this type in the future. We also, as the Chairman Burns mentioned, are expecting to receive the first application for a small modular reactor design in late 2016. In closing, I recognize that our congressional oversight committees are more interested than ever in NRC's mission and the way we are carrying out that mission. I firmly believe that NRC can provide Congress with the information it needs to perform its oversight duties while preserving the independence that is essential to accomplishing our safety and security mission. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, and I'll now recognize myself 5 minutes for this, starting the questioning. So here we go. On August 25th, 2015, the Commissioner released a vote concerning the cumulative effects of regulation process enhancement and risk prioritization initiative. From a review of the votes, it appears that Commissioners Savinicki and Ostendorf voted to approve staff option 1, which is a continuation of NRC efforts to address the cumulative effects of regulation. On the other hand, Chairman Burns and Commissioner Barron approved one aspect of staff option 2, which is to allow licensees to request compliance schedule changes using a risk prioritization methodology. Chairman Burns, with the vote split as it was in this manner, can you help the committee understand how the NRC staff will proceed in this manner? What exactly has the staff been directed to do?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Essentially, the staff will continue, and that was part of the instruction that we gave in our staff requirements memo, our direction to the staff, that it should continue the ongoing efforts with respect to the cumulative effects of regulation. I think that in simplest terms, that's the outcome. This was not an effort to sort of draw back the staff, but I think there was a difference of view as to the value added of one of the suggested options that the staff gave us.
Thank you. Commissioner Ostendorf, in your vote, you support a status quo approach and emphasize that the NRC staff can already apply risk-informed decision-making in reviewing licensee exemption requests, and that risk insights should be considered through existing agency processes. Do you believe current NRC regulations and guidance provide adequate risk prioritization authorities for the staff, and are there other improvements that could be made to ensure that the focus of NRC work remains on safety significant actions?
Yes, sir. I believe, Chairman Shinkus, that the staff does have existing authority to use risk insights in making decisions, in particular with respect to the timing of completion of individual nuclear power plant compliance with various requirements. And though there's a 2-2 split in the vote, I'd say there's a lot of consensus among the 4 of us, if I can say my personal view here, and that we were somewhat hesitant, Commissioner Savinicki and I, to look at adding an additional bureaucratic step to the process that we don't think was necessarily needed.
Great, thank you. Chairman Burns, what will the next steps procedurally be when the Commission receives the staff paper expected in October concerning the remaining post-Fukushima Tier 2 and Tier 3 activities? Will the Commission close out any of these?
I think we have to wait to see what the paper says. In requesting that paper, I think you can, from my sense at least, it sort of foreshadows. I think the Commission is interested in seeing what do we have left with respect to the Tier 2 and Tier 3, and are we at a point where we can make the judgment about value added, if any, of pursuing some of those options. So I would expect the Commission to give careful consideration to what the staff puts before us in terms of looking at a path forward.
Thank you. The Commission is currently developing its fiscal year 2017 budget request. As you all know, the courts directed the NRC to resume consideration to fulfill its statutory obligation to review the Yucca Mountain license application. You have previously stated the current plan activities will use the remaining available funding for Yucca Mountain and need approximately $330 million to complete the license. I would like to ask each of you individually for a simple yes or no answer. Will you support requesting funding in the NRC's budget to continue review of the Yucca Mountain license application?
For me, no, not in the absence, no, in the absence of other indication that the agency, the Department of Energy, would also be going forward with it.
Okay. Commissioner Savinicki?
Yes, consistent with my previous votes.
Commissioner Ostendorf?
Yes, consistent with my previous votes.
Commissioner Barron?
No, I don't support requesting funding because, as a practical matter, I don't see how the adjudicatory process at NRC can work if the Department of Energy does not support its own application.
But we do all agree that the Nuclear Waste Policy Act is the law of the land, which states that the long-term repository in the statute is defined as Yucca Mountains, correct? Commissioner, Chairman Burns?
Yeah, the Waste Policy Act identifies Yucca Mountain as the one for evaluation.
Thank you.
Subject to approval.
Commissioner Savinicki?
Yes, it's the law until modified or changed.
Commissioner Ostendorf?
Yes.
And Commissioner Barron?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I only have 12 seconds left. I'll yield back my time and yield to the ranking member, Mr. Tonko, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Barron, I believe we agree with each other that safety at nuclear plants is of paramount importance. I want to ask you about the way in which a changing climate affects safety and operations at nuclear power plants. In July, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration confirmed that 2014 was the hottest year on record. The world experienced record high surface temperatures, ocean temperatures, and continued sea level rise, all in 2014. A number of areas in our country are experiencing prolonged, severe drought conditions, and since greenhouse gas emissions continue to rise, these trends are likely to continue or worsen going forward. So it is not surprising that this summer the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant in Massachusetts was forced to shut down because its cooling water supply was too hot. The NRC license for Pilgrim requires that the intake water be less than 75 degrees and that the discharge water not exceed 102 degrees. The intake water was above 75 degrees and the discharge water was at 101.2. Also, this is not the first time that the water there has risen above those permitted levels. It happened twice in 2013 as well. And the Pilgrim facility is not the only one to have experienced this problem in recent years. So I ask, what exactly happened at Pilgrim, and should we expect that it could happen again?
Well, thank you for the question. I think you articulated this particular event very well. We've seen a number of plants temporarily shut down, reduce power, or seek regulatory exemptions when their cooling water supplies either got too warm or were insufficient. We've seen several instances of that over the last several years, as you mentioned, at a number of different plants. Currently, those issues are evaluated on a case-by-case basis. So the technical specifications of each of those plants, as you indicated, indicate the temperatures that are acceptable for cooling water intake and discharge, and the plants have got to meet those technical specifications. If they can't, because the water's too hot or there isn't enough of it, they're going to scale back power, they're going to shut down, or they're going to come to the NRC and say, we think it's safe to operate a little bit warmer than that with the water, and seek an exemption. And then we at the NRC, the staff, would look at that exemption request on a case-by-case basis.
So the plants are given a 30-year license, and most designs require significant availability of water for the cooling process. So what is the NRC doing to ensure that proposed plants will have sufficient water and sufficient cool water to operate? And again, spanning over a 30-year plan.
Well, it's an interesting question because, as you point out, with the timescales, we could see changes in that on climate. You know, another piece of this that I want to raise is related to the climate risk of flooding. And so there's a lot of analysis being done at NRC right now on that issue as a result of the post-Fukushima flood hazard reevaluations, right? So at plants across the country, the current flood hazard based on the latest science is being reevaluated, and that is going to include all the latest information, what to expect in terms of flooding issues.
Okay, and does the NRC review of a license application consider water availability and competition for water use within the watershed or coastal zone in the plant's proposed location over the 30-year span of the license?
I believe all those issues would be addressed in the environmental impact review, environmental impact statement.
And Chairman Burns, and to our other two commissioners, your thoughts on this matter as we look at a 30-year window that reviews a license review or application. Given the climate change challenge, what are your thoughts as to how we proceed forward?
Mr. Tonko, as I think Commissioner Barron said, those issues are taken into account in terms of the licensing review, and actually our licenses are issued generally for 40 years. It's a 40-year license that's generally issued. So those are looked at whether from, and there may be safety as well as environmental aspects to it. Part of the licensing of plant does look at longer term in terms of not just operation today, but operation over a period of time. So I think those would be taken into account in that regard.
So has there been an adjustment in the thinking, in the applied science of all of this with the changed data compilation that we've understood to be making a statement now?
Well, I think what there is there's an evaluation. I'd hesitate, and I'd have to check for the staff, and we could probably provide you an answer for the record with respect to how that's changed. As Commissioner Barron says, there are on occasions there have been our plants that may experience the high temperatures in the water source, and the license conditions and all deal with that. I don't know that we have actually looked at a particular trend or seen a particular trend.
Or existing plants, assisting them in any way?
Pardon me?
Is there any effort to help existing plants to adapt to changing water temperature and drought?
Well, I think, again, that what they look at is what those parameters are, and there may be an assessment of what the margins are in terms of the levels or the temperature levels, I would expect.
Thank you, and I yield.
Gentleman yields back his time. Chair now recognizes the Chairman Emeritus of the full committee, Joe Barton from Texas, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What happens to high-level waste at civilian reactors that are decommissioned? Mr. Chairman, Mr. Burns?
Currently, that waste is stored at the site.
Permanently?
Well, until there is a repository or a consolidated storage site to take it to.
Okay. I listened to the answers that each of the commissioners gave to Chairman Shimkus's question about Yucca Mountain, and you know, y'all were all agreeing that it was a repository, but you weren't sure if you could put any funding for it. Wouldn't it be, and I support Yucca Mountain as a final repository, so there's no daylight between Chairman Shimkus and myself on that. But I do think that given the status of Yucca Mountain, or the lack of status, you might say, that it might be prudent to consider some sort of an interim storage solution. Mr. Chairman, each of the commissioners, what are your thoughts about moving forward with interim storage while we hash out the final resolution to permanent, given the fact that we're beginning to decommission these reactors And I don't think it's a good solution at all to have a high-level nuclear waste at a decommissioned civilian reactor site out in the country. So what are your thoughts on, let's try to figure out a way to do interim storage while we hash out permanent storage?
Well, Mr. Barton, the NRC, as you know, is a regulatory body, and what will come before us, whether it's an application for the repository yucca or whether interim storage facilities, we're prepared to look at that and make a safety and security judgment on that. We have in the past, we did consider the licensing and approve the licensing of an interim storage site, which did not go forward, the private fuel storage site, I believe in Utah. And we have had expressions of interest, and we may get an application from the waste control specialist. So we're
Chairman,
prepared to
you're open to it.
we will do what, as he say, in that area, we're prepared to receive an application and consistent with the law.
Let's hear the other
Go
three
forward.
commissioners. Ms. Savinsky?
Sir, again, as a safety regulator, our obligation is to make sure that if there is no alternative and this fuel ages in place for very, very long periods of time, that we have the safety judgment that it can be safe on the sites where it is located right now. So as a commissioner, that is our singular focus, is on whether or not it can be safely stored in the absence of other national
You're not answering.
solutions.
Y'all are very good at not answering questions.
I don't have
I
a
just ask a straight question. You know, you're citizens. Y'all are some of the smartest people. You know more about nuclear storage than anybody else in the country. I'm not asking for the Obama position. I'm just asking generally if you're open to an interim storage proposal. You know, that's all I'm asking.
I'm
so far,
confident-
I'm
I'm
0 for
confident
2.
that it's safely stored, but
let's-
as a citizen, I think that if it could be stored in fewer locations, that would be desirable.
Thank you.
Congressman Barton, I am open to an interim storage solution with the caveat that I think our storage insecurity right now, those practices at operating as well as decommissioned sites, it is being done safely and securely now.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Congressman, this is, as you know, ultimately a policy question for Congress. The Blue Ribbon Commission recommended consolidated interim storage as part of the overall solution to the nation's high-level waste problem. You know, as a citizen, I could say that interim storage could allow some decommissioned reactor sites to close completely. It would create a place for the spent fuel that's being kept on site to go, and it could reduce the federal government's liability for failure to take title to the waste. I just want to mention, though, that currently under the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, I think you have to have a change in the Nuclear Waste Policy Act to allow the Department of Energy to take title to that waste, which I think would be likely a kind of a necessary predicate for interim storage as you're imagining it.
I will say it's refreshing, Mr. Chairman, to hear people say that it is a policy question for the Congress to address. That is a good thing, and I appreciate their openness to it. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Capps, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you all for your testimony today. I represent Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant in San Luis Obispo, California, and this is a power plant that's owned and operated by PG&E, a key part of our local economy, supporting hundreds of quality jobs in the area, and also supplying efficient, clean energy for a lot of people. But it also sits very close to 2 significant earthquake faults. The Hoskrey fault was discovered during construction of the facility, but the shoreline fault was only discovered in 2008, and it comes within just a few hundred yards of the power plant. These faults have raised numerous important safety questions, particularly in the wake of the Fukushima disaster. These questions are particularly important as NRC considers PG&E's applications to relicense Diablo Canyon's 2 reactors for an additional 20 years. After Fukushima, I urged the NRC and PG&E to suspend this process, this renewal process, until seismic risks at Diablo were better understood. and consideration of relicensing was suspended soon after, but now the NRC has recently restarted the process. So Chairman Burns, can you provide a status update on the license review process and also outline the next steps and the timeline going forward?
Yes, ma'am. What the staff, there are two primary aspects to the review: a safety review and the environmental review to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act. The staff reinitiated the safety review, I think earlier this spring, and more recently published a notice on with respect to the scoping process for the environmental statement. And I think that's we're about at the end of the comment period for the scoping. I believe that the timeline for the decision making, it would be for the staff to make a decision by about 2017 with respect to the renewal. Now, separately, I think, as you know, we are also, and this comes in part out of post-Fukushima actions, but also I think the ongoing interest with respect to an evaluation on seismic issues. We also have a seismic evaluation underway. PG&E provided information, which, like other licensees did, with respect to the seismic reanalysis, and we've accepted that for review, and we're doing that, and I think that's about on the same time frame.
And would you highlight the steps that NRC is taking and has taken to ensure the public participation and transparency in this process? As you know, there is a great deal of interest in the community surrounding Diablo Canyon facility.
Yes, ma'am. Again, we've had a number of public meetings, some related to the seismic analysis as well as license renewal. The license renewal, I believe that there's formal intervention in the proceeding, and so that public hearing process would go on. We have a couple other issues with respect to how to treat I guess the easiest way to say it, how to treat updates of this, PG&E's updates as a seismic review, whether as a legal matter that involved a license amendment. And I believe that's still pending. That issue is still pending. So that, again, is a participation process. And I know our regional administrator has gone out and as just part of the normal process of the performance of the plant,
Right.
and I'll try to engage the public.
Thank you. And after the discovery of the shoreline fault, I worked with then State Senator Sam Blakesley, who's a physicist who studied these things, and others, to require additional seismic testing of the areas surrounding Diablo Canyon. And the state did comply, and the results of these studies were released last year by PG&E. These studies will be examined by NRC and by an independent panel of experts appointed by the state. I know you're aware and part of that. I know that there are experts that you have as well, but this independent, I've always said, if you're going to study something, have an outside third-party independent team to come in and assess the seismic risks. Can you assure us that no decisions regarding relicensing will be made until the state's independent review of the seismic data is completed?
Yeah, my understanding is we're taking into account the information developed by all the reviews with respect to the seismic characteristics of the site. That's my understanding.
And I know my time is out, but is this going to are these results going to be incorporated into your own analysis?
I believe we would take them into account, yes.
Thank you. I yield back.
Generally use Becker time. Chair now recognizes gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Harper, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to each of you for being here. And certainly, your agency has charged with a very important mission. It's important for the security of our country, and it's an agency that must function properly. And I would like to ask you a few questions, if I could, Mr. Chairman. In 2012, the Advisory Commission on Reactor Safeguards recommended the Commission not undertake any revisions to the limits of occupational radiation exposure. Are you aware of those recommendations?
Yeah, in general terms, I am, yes.
Okay. Okay. And do you support this recommendation?
Well, I think we would take that recommendation and evaluation into account in determining whether to go forward with any particular changes to our rules. I think this would probably bear mostly on our exposure radiation protection rules in 10 CFR Part 20 of our regulations.
And are you aware that on March 18th, the Commission published an advance notice of proposed rulemaking to receive public comment on revising these standards?
Yes, I am.
What was the basis for pursuing this rulemaking, giving the ACRS recommendation?
Well, the rulemaking, as I recall, involves more than a question of whether or not occupational standards ought to be changed. In part, I think the question is whether they ought to be changed in conformance with some international recommendations. But there are other aspects, as I recall, of the rule that might be considered. And right now, at this point, the point of the advance notice is to receive public comment to determine whether or not we ought to go forward at all with a proposed rule, and much less a final rule. And we haven't gotten to that point as yet.
So what other aspects may have been considered?
I think there are ways of dose calculation. There's some say probably more administrative type changes. I'd be happy to provide that for the record. But it's more than, as I recall, more than just a question of whether or not to reduce the permissible occupational dose.
And I would ask that you provide that additional information for the record and the purposes of this hearing. And if I may ask you also, Chairman Burns, due to the federal government's inability to open Yucca Mountain, utilities currently store spent nuclear fuel in dry cask storage at reactor sites and what are known, as you know, independent spent fuel storage installations. In 2007, the Commission directed that the design basis threat for these facilities were adequate and safe. However, there is now an effort to impose new security requirements upon licensees, which will necessitate licensees incurring significant cost and require additional safety and training requirements. Has the design basis threat changed since 2007?
I'm not aware that it has.
So the answer would be no, is what you're saying, Chairman?
I believe so.
Okay. And if not, why is the Commission pursuing additional safety requirements on dry cask storage facilities?
I presume, and maybe some of my fellow commissioners may have something to say on that in looking at it, this is in terms of trying to assure that the design basis threat is met and that other upgrades that we deem necessary through the public comment process.
Okay, but it hasn't changed, and so but now we've got these additional safety requirements. Yes, sir, Mr. Commissioner.
Congressman Harper, if I may add, the design basis threat review did not indicate a change to the design basis threat. What we have is an agency, it's called implementing guidance, which is used by licensees to execute our regulations. And so there's some clarifying steps taken in that guidance. It's my understanding, I was briefed on this just 2 weeks ago, it's my understanding there's not any ratcheting up of standards in this new guidance.
Mr. Chairman, I believe my time is up. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Florida, Congresswoman Castor, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good morning, NRC members. Thank you very much for your service to the country and for being here this morning. In Florida, consumers are still quite angry over, due to the fact that they are on the hook for repairs and closeout to the Crystal River nuclear plant. This will blow your mind, but customers are on the hook for over $3 billion because the utility in a repair situation did some things out of the norm on their own and in essence broke the plant. They sometimes refer to it as the Humpty Dumpty plant. As the nuclear plants across the country age and more of these type of repairs have to be done. At Crystal River, this was the steam generator. I guess a former NRC board member called this a mega screw up. They said something similar about San Onofre as well. Could you go through right now, what is the NRC's role when a utility embarks on these type of repairs?
Well, essentially, our role is an oversight role. We may inspect, observe what changes or in effect construction type activity at the site. In some respects, we have an approval role with respect to issuing amendments to a license if that's necessary, because what the nature of the repair or the change to operation is such that it requires it's beyond the current license, and it requires a change to that change the license.
So in a case like Duke Energy and its predecessor Florida Power at Crystal River, when they embarked on doing some repair that was out of the norm, at that point, does the NRC have oversight? Do you have the ability to come in and say, you know, what you're doing does not meet the current standards there, where we, can you say, no, do not proceed with that repair, we do not agree?
We have, again, if it's an activity that would not be within the scope of their current license, and that their current license, we would have a role in terms of reviewing a proposed change before it's implemented. But there are many types of activities at a plant which can be done within the scope of the license. What the licensee is supposed to do is to do an adequate and high quality evaluation of the nature of that activity.
Do any of the other members have a comment on that? Yes, sir.
Thank you for the question. I had a chance to visit Crystal River back in 2010 when I first joined the commission. What we had here is, think of a sphere that is made of concrete. It's called containment. And there is a tensioning cable that went around the circumference of this sphere. In detensioning that cable as part of a maintenance period, there's criticism as to the technique that's used to detension this cable, resulting in concrete cracks. The NRC does not, from a regulatory standpoint, go and micromanage exactly how the licensee conducts its maintenance.
Okay.
What we do is make sure that plant is safe to start up when they finish the period.
Okay. How many nuclear plants are there in the U.S. right now?
There are 99 operating plants in the United States.
And are there many being built now, new plants?
There are 5 under construction. One, Watts Bar plant, the Tennessee Valley Authority, will probably enter operation next year.
And most of the nuclear plants that are in existence today were constructed during what time period?
1980s.
So these are
70s,
aging
1980s.
plants, and
Yeah.
it's likely over time that to meet their useful life that they're going to need repairs. Do you feel that the NRC has the capability now? I know you said your responsibility is just to, you don't want to micromanage, but this is a $3 billion cost to customers in Florida. They're on the hook for it, even though it was the responsibility of the utility. We've got to do a better job. Don't you see any future now, the NRC, with these aging plants? You've got to take a more active role in ensuring that the utilities meet its standard of care?
Well, we do take an active role. We have rigorous requirements for quality assurance in terms of activities, planning for the way activities are undertaken. We have a maintenance rule that focuses on equipment in the plant. And the license renewal, to the extent plants go into license renewal, we focus on the aging of components. But I think, as Commissioner Ostendorf said, at some point, the operations and maintenance of the facility is the responsibility of the licensee. They need to conduct it in conformance with our safety requirements, and that's where it is. But I think from my standpoint and the Commission's standpoint, we have significant requirements that address.
But would you be
safety and
willing
maintenance.
to look into this moving forward so that customers can avoid these kind of major costs that are passed on to them?
Well, in part of our oversight of plants, we certainly will look at the question of maintenance and the quality in terms of how operations and maintenance operations are conducted.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Kentucky, Chairman Woodfield, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. On August 3rd, EPA finalized its Clean Power Plan under Section 111D of the Clean Air Act. And of course, that regulation has created a lot of controversy around the country. And many people think it's illegal. Lawsuits have been filed. And as you know, EPA arbitrarily selected CO2 emission limits for each state, but also they allow for power upgrades, uprates in that regulation. And I was just curious if you all, or maybe you, Mr. Burns, and anyone else would like to comment, would tell me, did EPA actually talk to you all about that plan before it was finalized? Did anyone from EPA come and discuss this with you before they finalized it?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Now, what is the NRC's normal time frame for reviewing and approving these power uprate requests?
I think it will depend on the complexity of it, but I usually think within probably a couple years.
Yeah. Now, you all have some pending uprate requests before you. Right?
I think we might, but I'd have to check for the record. Certainly, the addressing power uprates or reviewing it is something we've done over the years.
Yeah. And have you all given any thought of whether or not you need to adjust or otherwise accelerate your process for reviewing and approving these power uprate applications as a result of the Clean Power Plan?
No.
Okay. Okay. Well, your website says you have 4 pending applications for power uprates, and there's a table showing 7 expected applications for power uprates. And of course, I don't know how many states are going to submit their state implementation plans on time or anything else, but this is an area that obviously states are looking vigorously for ways to meet the CO2 standard or limits. And if you can produce more nuclear power, obviously that's one way to do it. So I think that's certainly a very important issue to be focused on. Let me ask you another question. We hear a lot about modular nuclear power plants. Would you give me are you all taking any applications for modular nuclear plants, or is that premature, or is there, I know that there are groups that are meeting with DOE on a regular basis about modular plants. So what is your all's perspective on that?
Well, we do expect an application for a design certification for a small modular unit by the end of, I think the application will be filed in late 2016. And also the Tennessee Valley Authority has indicated it will seek what we call an early site permit, basically a site approval would be at what was the Clinch River site to site a small modular reactor. And what the other thing I'd emphasize, Mr. Whitfield, in fact, we had a workshop, I guess last week, jointly sponsored with the Department of Energy, where we're trying to engage the community that may be interested in a small modular reactor or advanced reactors to assure that when the time comes, we're prepared in terms of looking at the acceptance criteria and things like that. So we're, as I say, we have a couple things coming, and then we're trying to make sure we're prepared for the longer term.
You know, at one time I'd heard that the Commission was not in a position regulatory to deal with these issues. Is that accurate, or is that just a wild rumor that I heard?
Well, what I think we are prepared for from the licensing process, I'm confident we can manage these types of applications through the licensing process. What the difference is, and this is one of the issues, or some of the issues we've been working on with DOE, is because some of the technology is, the current is non-light water reactor technology. So, and that's where you want to see what the gaps are in terms of the acceptance criteria, things like that.
Right.
Department of Energy in its R&D role has prepared some reports they've shared with us, and as I say, we're keeping an open dialogue there with them as well as those who may be interested in the industry.
Do you want to make a comment, Mr.?
Sure. I just wanted to add there are some differences between small modular reactors and the larger traditional reactors, and those differences raise some technical and potentially some policy issues that the agency is actively working through. So there are questions about control room staffing, the size of emergency planning zones, how are annual fees going to work. And so the Commission actually recently addressed a couple of those issues. We're initiating rulemakings, looking at the fee question and the emergency planning question, and the staff interacting with the Commission are going to be looking at these other issues as well, so that there's good regulatory certainty for potential applicants about, well, what's the path forward to get a license if you have a small modular reactor design.
Gentleman's time expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to congratulate Mr. Barron on your confirmation. I wouldn't want to go through that process myself. Mr. Chairman, is the NRC capable of managing a significant growth in nuclear power if the nation should decide to go down that path?
I think we are capable of managing that. One of the issues we're dealing with today is trying to look out 5 years. This is the Project AIM 2020 from the standpoint of looking at what do we need to prepare for, as well as looking at where we are today. Because we grew a lot in the last decade. We have, in terms of on our plate, a fewer number of reactor applications. But as we had the discussion with Mr. Whitfield, one of my concerns is that we are prepared if we get additional applications, not only for small modular reactors or advanced reactors, but also the current fleet.
You get upgrades, you get new power plants, you get small modular reactors, you get a whole slew of things.
Yes. And so I think part of what we want to do and what we're trying to look at through our Project AIM is positioning ourselves that we maintain the technical expertise that we need in those areas.
Thank you. Commissioner Swinnecki, could you explain Project AIM a little bit briefly, please?
Well, as Ranking Member Tonko and a number of members of the subcommittees addressed in their opening statements, we've seen a very dynamic electricity industry over the last few years. As a large organization, we lag a little bit behind in adjusting as the regulator to the changes to the regulated industry. So we find ourselves right now at resourcing and staffing levels and an organization that is not always aligned to the regulatory work that's in front of us. So Project AIM is a whole set of initiatives of looking at bringing, simply put, our HR director said we need to move expertise in alignment with the work in front of us and look at being able to be efficient and effective, but maintain the expertise to be agile, because based on the Clean Power Plan and other things, it's very difficult to us to forecast 5 years from now or 10 years from now exactly how we need to be staffed and resourced, but we're going to work on that efficiency and agility piece.
Thank you. Commissioner Barron, is there a cumulative effective regulation on the new licensing process? In other words, is there an effect that would require licensing to take another 5 years or something like that?
Well, we have several processes in place to look at cumulative effects of regulation issues. One of the things we do, for example, and these were instituted prior to my arrival on the Commission, when a proposed rule for a new requirement now goes out at NRC, that is accompanied at that time with proposed implementation guidance, so that licensees have a very clear sense of what is likely going to be required of them. That makes it much easier for them to comment. It also makes it easier for them to plan, to provide us with good cost estimates about what it might cost to comply. So, so that's one of the things that we're doing already on an ongoing basis. Licensing of new reactors and new reactor designs In some cases, it's taken a number of years. I mean, typically, these in recent years has not been the fastest process, and there are a variety of reasons for that. From my point of view, and if I'm looking towards, say, small modular reactors being an application we would expect next year, what we, I think, as an agency are emphasizing to applicants is you need to submit a high-quality application, and then we need to be ready for it. And, both sides really have to bring their A game to it if we're going to get it done in a reasonable time frame. And part of that is also thinking ahead, as I was mentioning to Chairman Whitfield, thinking ahead, what are the potential issues, the potential challenges that we would need to resolve on a particular license or type of application? Let's get that going well in advance so that when that application actually comes in, a lot of work's already been done to move us toward a timely result.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Barron, what would it take to get the Yucca Mountain project to move forward?
You're talking about it for NRC's review of it? Or the whole,
to get the project moving forward.
For NRC's review of it, the estimate that the staff came up with for the cost of an adjudicatory proceeding is somewhere in the range of $300 to $350 million. And that would be, I believe, the largest adjudication.
But that's not, I mean, this isn't just about money, the Yucca Mountain project. There's other impediments in the way.
Well, and as I mentioned earlier, and the reason I haven't supported asking for that money is you have to have an applicant that's committed to their application. And so you're looking at years of an adversarial trial-like process to get that license on, I believe it's currently 288 contentions or claims. That number could go up if the adjudication resumed. And if you don't have an applicant that wants to defend its own application, ultimately they have the burden of demonstrating that their application is going to be safe. I just don't see how that process works. So you'd have to have an engaged applicant. DOE would need money to do that. We would need money to do it. There are a lot of things you would need to make the process work.
Thank you.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Olson, for 5 minutes.
I thank the chair and welcome to our witnesses. Nuclear power is an important part of America's energy portfolio. Not far from my home is the South Texas project in Bay City. It's a stable and reliable source of power for the entire Gulf Coast and a cornerstone of our grid. Unit 1 came online on August 25th of 1988. Unit 2, June 19th of 1989. Beyond electricity, the plant provides 1,200 good-paying jobs for our local economy and brings prospects for the next generation of science and engineering students. As I've mentioned at this committee before, local schools like Wharton County Junior College, led by President Betty McCrohan, have stepped up to train the next generation of nuclear power workers. As older employees retire from the plant, where they have worked for decades since it opened in the late 1980s, training like this is more critical than ever to fill these gaps. And nationwide, nuclear power is critical. As the White House continues to shut down baseload power, nuclear helps keep our grid running. We love wind in Texas. We're number one, but you can't run an entire grid on wind. My first questions are for Chairman Burns. We're not building nuclear plants these days, new ones. The application for Unit 3 and 4 filed with the NRC for South Texas were filed on September 20th of 2007. They're going nowhere quickly. So older plants remain incredibly important. In the coming years, a number of these plants will begin the process of asking for another extension beyond the typical 30-year extension. How will the Commission approach these requests to extend the life of these older plants? What sort of timeline will the NRC use to sort out these issues?
Okay, thank you for the question. And I had the pleasure of going to the South Texas site a few months ago and visiting down there. And I know what the support, talked to some folks down there in terms of the support in the community and the importance with which they see it. Our license renewal rules essentially provide for initially a 20-year life extension. We are also in the process of considering, and there's been research done, again, this is something that the Department of Energy has also supported, that looks at the potential for extension up to 80 years. That's still on the horizon. We may hear something from industry within the next few years, but we're trying to position ourselves in terms of the research and all on that. But we have a well-tested licensing renewal process. Now, about 75 of the 99 units currently in operation, I believe, have received renewed licenses under that process. So, and we have others. We are either in the review process or expect to come in the review. So I think we're well equipped to handle and have demonstrated the effectiveness of the license renewal process.
Thank you. Question two for Ms. Savigny and Commissioner Ostendorf. If you could pick one change of law at the NRC that would put that in place immediately, you're the all-powerful king, the queen, what would that be? Ms. Savigny? Wow. Mr. Ostendorf, you're the king. What would you want to do? What would you change? One change.
Well, that's a great question.
My staff.
I wish I had a pithy answer to respond to you, Congressman. I would like to get some thought to it and get back to you.
Thank you. Ms.
not a
Savigny,
question
your
we get that
comments, ma'am? Any ideas through your head? You're the queen for a day.
I would do the same. I think Commissioner Ostendorf and I were both also congressional staff in earlier parts of our career, so I've put aside my thought of changing law, and now I just focus on complying with it. So.
Okay, as Chairman Barnes said, as citizens, not commissioners, any ideas? What would you change as a citizen? Just any ideas? No?
Well, one of the issues, and I know we've not struggled with, but have had a lot of attention to, and I'll venture, I guess, is that there is a provision that applies with respect to power reactors on foreign ownership, domination, and control. And while that has, I think, a role, I think there's actually greater flexibility in the materials area. And this has been, an interesting area for investment and all. And it's something, to some extent, it's a little bit out of what I would call the normal wheelhouse of the NRC. So, I wonder if that's, but that's not a fully gelled thought maybe, but that's something I think of. And the reason I think about that is because I remember, I think it may have been in the Energy Policy Act, for example, originally we had antitrust responsibilities, which were also being done by the Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Justice, and that was something that I think we were relieved from, because again, if we're focused on safety and security, that's where we want to be focused. So that's just a sort of a random idea.
Well, thank you. I'm out of time.
Gentlemen's time's well
the
expired.
count on for the record. What you want to do for the record, please, sir.
I'm a small R Republican. I leave it to you all to write the laws, and we'll implement them.
I yield back. Thank you.
Chair now recognizes the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Pallone, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Barron, my questions are to you. I understand that the nuclear industry developed Severe Accident Management Guidelines, or SAMGs, in 1996 to respond to severe events involving multiple failures of safety equipment in nuclear plants. So my question is, well, I have four, but first, what are the benefits of emergency planning at nuclear power plant facilities, and how can a focus on safety protect the public and prevent the massive costs associated with the Fukushima-style disaster?
Well, I think everyone agrees. I don't think there's any question that severe accident management guidelines, that kind of emergency planning, is crucial and really valuable. I don't think, the debate we had recently was about, or the question we had presented to us recently is, should we make that a requirement? It's been a voluntary initiative, as you mentioned, went into effect basically in 1998. Wasn't really inspected by NRC from 2000 on until after Fukushima. I think you could ask industry, you could ask anyone who's a player in this area, and they would tell you these are really important planning tools And SAMGs are a very good idea, and you want to have them at plants.
Well, can I ask you second, have these requirements led to increased plant safety or increased protection for public health and safety?
Yeah, I think everyone views the severe accident management guidelines as an enhancement to safety, and the question is really, should they be enforceable? And my view is that they should be. The experience that we had in that period where it was and it still is a voluntary initiative, where it was a voluntary initiative we hadn't inspected. After Fukushima, NRC inspectors went out to plants, and for the first time in maybe 12 years, they had looked to see what was the status of these voluntary SAMGs. And it was pretty troubling what they found. There were SAMGs that were outdated, hadn't been updated in years. There were emergency responders that weren't trained on the SAMGs. And as a result of that, the near-term task force after Fukushima and the NRC staff both recommended making that a requirement so that it would be enforceable. I agree with that view.
Okay, so obviously they're still voluntary. That you answered that question, but can the commission make them mandatory? Are you moving in that direction? Do you have that power?
We could. We're not moving in that direction. There was a recent commission vote on a proposed rule that covered more broadly a number of areas that Commissioner Ossendorf referred to earlier, post-Fukushima mitigation issues. So it's a larger safety rule, and the staff recommended that in that proposal we include a proposed requirement for the first time for severe accident management guidelines. And I supported including that as a requirement. I was the minority on that. The majority thought we should not include it. And from my point of view, that's a mistake. Everyone agrees you get a safety benefit from it. Enforceability has a lot of value. And when we had a commission meeting on this, a public commission meeting, I asked industry representatives, well, is this going to be a burdensome thing if we require this? And the answer we got back is, well, no, we're doing it voluntarily now. It's not going to be a burdensome cost. It's no, little or no additional cost to make it enforceable. From my point of view, when you have a substantial safety enhancement and you have something that's not burdensome, that's something we should include in a proposed rule, and the public should have an opportunity to comment on that.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. Let me just ask one more thing. Maybe you've already answered it, but after Fukushima, was there another review of these SAMGs, and has that made a difference in terms of updating the guidelines or training plant personnel in response to Fukushima?
Well, yeah, that was the review I referenced, and after Fukushima, there was an inspection of the status of the SAMGs at all the plants across the country, and it was spotty. So every plant had SAMGs, and the overall conclusion from the staff was that they thought they'd be effective. But recently, when we looked at the question of should they be made enforceable, we asked the staff, well, are you confident that we would have effective SAMGs at every plant in the country if we ever needed them, if it remains a voluntary initiative? And the answer I got back was no. We're not confident, based on the history, that they would be there when you needed them. For me, that means it should be a requirement, or we should at least propose it as a requirement, and the public should have an opportunity, all stakeholders should have an opportunity to comment on it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Gentleman's time expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latta, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Chairman, Commissioners, thanks very much for being with us today. Appreciate your testimony. And over the work period, I was at Davis-Besse, which is really a stone's throw from my district. And when I was there, I saw firsthand several of the really significant investments that they're being made, have made, or are making by First Energy post-Fukushima. And this massive construction undertaking was the emergency water feed system, where I learned about how nuclear facilities are working with the NRC to continue their safe operations. And so, I mean, there's a lot of investment going on out there. But if I could, Mr. Chairman, if I could start with you, if I could ask this question. And it's been touched on a little bit by Chairman Whitfield, but I'd like to approach on a little bit different area. That you stated that last week that the NRC and the Department of Energy had a 2-day public workshop with stakeholders to explore options for increased efficiency
from both a technical and regulatory perspective in the safe development and deployment of innovative reactor technology. And I know that Chairman Whitfield talked to you mainly on the small modular reactors, but I'd like to ask is more, how can the Commission establish a regulatory and licensing framework for advanced technologies that reasonably assures private industry a pathway towards commercial development? And I know that you talked about, in regards to Chairman Whitfield's saying that you could manage it and also give it, but if you could really get into the advanced technologies and how you could give some detail in that, please.
Yeah, certainly. Again, what we try to do with the workshop, which we jointly sponsored with the Department of Energy, was to engage those who are thinking about potentially pursuing the advanced technology. And some of the, again, what I try to say is I think the basically how to license and the framework we have for licensing, that is essentially sound. Whether you use the one-step licensing, which the larger evolutionary reactors, such as being the AP1000 being built at Vogtle or Summer are using, or you use the older two-step type licensing. And I think a couple of things, one of the things I think the staff heard during the conference was whether there are ways of perhaps maybe stepwise looking at systems and basically getting to the point, you're not so much issuing a license because you issue a license for the entire facility, but you get to some sort of a design approval or a stepwise process. And I think that is something I think the staff wants to explore some more. The other piece of this is, too, and this is the report I alluded to that came in from the Department of Energy at the beginning of this year to us, is to make sure that our general design criteria, those are the acceptance criteria for the technology, are they really in sync with what we're going to see with the new technology? The general design criteria have been there for many years. They have served us well in terms of light water technology, but looking at how we may need to adjust that. So we're continuing to engage with that.
Okay, let me follow up with that because this is important for a lot of folks out there, that how can the NRC establish the organization to be responsive to the potential applicants while not forcing the existing licensees to fund those costs as part of the annual fee assessment?
Well, I think there are a number. I think you put your finger on it in terms of we are, I think as you know, we are basically a fee agency. 90% of our appropriation is recovered in fees, primarily from the industry and the operating fleet. There are probably ways, and I think that there's probably a discussion with the Department of Energy in terms of whether, again, because of their role in research and development, whether there are ways in terms of providing assistance that way. And I know the DOE has done some of that.
I saw Commissioner Ossendorf, you were shaking your head on that. Would you like to respond to that?
Well, I agree with the Chairman's comments. I would just add that there are other technologies out there that we have not received license applications for or design certifications for. Pebble bed reactors, molten salt, sodium-based cooling systems. And these are technical areas that we might have at best 3 or 4 people in the agency that have some knowledge of these new technologies. And as we are going forward looking at our fee-based rule requirements under law, it's very difficult for us to justify under our current fee recovery arrangements spending dollars for expertise that is not going to benefit an existing or likely applicant in the near term.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you very much. My time has expired, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. And Chair, now I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, like my colleague from Texas, I wasn't happy that South Texas project didn't expand. Of course, the market conditions changed with Fukushima and Tokyo Power, but I appreciate our Regulatory Commission being here today. Chairman Burns, in regards to Yucca Mountain, the NRC Safety Evaluation Report recommended should not authorize construction because of certain land and water rights. I've been to Yucca Mountain a couple of years ago with our subcommittee, and it's in the middle of federal land owned by DOD and DOE. Exactly what are the land and water rights requirements that the safety evaluation report references?
The specifics, Mr. Green, unfortunately, I don't know. We can certainly provide for the record, but they would be, I think, outlined in the safety evaluation report. I presume that they have to do with state or local rights. Okay. And again, that's what the staff is identifying. They're identifying a legal constraint with the
federal government doesn't own the water rights to that land?
I can't speak specifically to it.
State issue.
I think it's a state owns the water there. But
I didn't see much water there, but I can see that's still a right. But
yeah.
Has the NRC determined the funding level necessary to complete the application, including an adjudicatory hearing on contested issues? If so, what's that amount that would finish the application?
Again, our estimate would be it's somewhere on the order of about $300 to $330 million to complete the review, which would be the adjudication and the outcome of the any steps that would be necessary to the outcome of the adjudication.
Is that money available?
It has not been appropriated to the NRC.
If that was appropriated, how long do you think it would take for the NRC to complete the proceedings, including the adjudicatory?
I don't have a firm guess. You would have to sort of re-engage the participants. Again, if I'm looking at what the original conception of under the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, I would imagine it's a 3 to 4 year period. But that's a guess.
Would the gentleman yield for 1 second?
For 1 second.
Yeah, it would be helpful if the NRC would place that in their budget request, so then we would get it authorized, and then we would get it appropriated. I yield back.
Thank you. Obviously, I support long-term storage, and now we'll go to interim storage. This year, the NRC received 2 letters of intent to file for a consolidated interim storage facility, including one in Andrews County, Texas. Can you outline what the NRC's current regulations for authorizing an interim storage facility?
Yeah, so we have the regulations that we have in place, particularly for that apply to that type of facility, they would be applied. And as I indicated in an answer in an earlier question, we actually have gone through a licensing process for a similar type facility some years ago, the private fuel storage, which did not go into operation. So the basic licensing safety framework, if you will, is there.
Under current regs, I assume a public hearing would be required.
The opportunity, it's not required, but an opportunity would be noticed, yes.
Will the NRC request funds for fiscal year 2017 for the review of the consolidated interim storage applications?
It is not in the budget that was submitted because basically when we got the letters of intent, that was after the budget was in the process. What we would do is I think we would look at our resources and reprioritize within that to the extent it would begin in 17.
Well,
and if we were going on beyond, part of this is a problem of timing. In terms of the development, the review process of the budget was well underway before we had the applications come in. But within our resources, we would look in terms of how we do it.
In light of the court decision, I would hope that the NRC would move not only on long-term, but also interim storage. It's required. In the funding, first you have to ask for it to get it. And although maybe we could do that, but again, we're not the appropriations committee. But Mr. Chairman, I know I'm out of time, but it's a frustration we've had that we haven't been able to move to either interim storage or obviously even long-term storage. So thank you.
I thank my colleague. Chair now recognize the gentleman from West Virginia, Mr. McKinley, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During the recently concluded Iranian nuclear deal, France and Russia both made offers that if the Iranian government would suspend its nuclear enrichment program, that they would provide them with reactor rods, reactor fuel, and would process the spent fuel rods. Interesting concept. Were you all approached from the NRC, the American side, as to also say whether or not that that was an alternative to the Iranians continuing their enrichment program? Were you approached to see whether or not America would join in that?
No, we were not.
Really? Interesting. Mr. Chairman, you also said that you went down to the nuclear facility down in Texas, and I guess out of the 3,700 employees you have, you probably numbers of times are out inspecting nuclear facilities. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question.
I'm assuming of the 3,700 employees or so you have, or whatever that final number is today, that some of you are spending time inspecting nuclear facilities. Is that correct?
That's correct. We have resident inspectors.
So my question is, what if you weren't able to do that? Would you be comfortable in having the respective utility companies just give you a report? Or would you insist on doing an inspection yourself?
No, I think we would be uncomfortable. I think inspection as well as reporting is an important part of oversight.
I would think so. So should we be uncomfortable with this agreement that the Iranians are going to provide us with their own inspection of their nuclear facilities and prevent Western nations or others to come in to do this inspection? Should we be uncomfortable with that?
I think that's something as the NRC, we are not involved in the issues.
Well, I can hear the music already starting. The dance is starting. But I said it. I wanted to know at the beginning. You wouldn't be comfortable with it in America. So why should we be comfortable with it in Iran? And I think it's a pretty simple. You've set forth. Thank you on that. My last question to you is more has to do with this archaic process of burying our waste. I'm an engineer, a licensed engineer, and I have problems with municipal waste where we're burying it. We're burying batteries and motor fuel, and we have the issue of carbon sequestration. We're burying that into the ground. Medical waste are being thrown into the ground, and now we have coal slurry that is potentially causing some issues. Why are we perpetuating this idea of with our spent fuel rods of having a program we're going to bury that way? I know France is recycling their material, and everyone says it's very expensive, and the French acknowledge that it is. But isn't that better than burying our material and telling our grandchildren it's your problem to deal with later on?
Well, the question, President Reagan in the 1980s lifted the bar on reprocessing of nuclear waste at the time, but basically said it would have to be a commercial enterprise. And
so is France is France wrong then in reprocessing?
I'm not saying France is right or wrong, but France, in terms of the economy and its structure, is very much different than the United States.
But if we subsidize our alternative fuels so dramatically, why aren't we doing that with spent fuel rods instead of burying it and allowing the next generation to have to deal with it?
I think that's a policy choice, that it can be safely disposed of. There is the possibility of reprocessing, but again, that's the choice outside the purview of the NRC.
Okay. Thank you very much. I yield back my time.
Gentleman's time expired. The word is retrievable, not buried. Just to help out here. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here with the commission. As you may know, I represent the state of Vermont. and this is my opportunity on behalf of the Vermonters I represent to talk about a couple of issues related to the decommissioning of Vermont Yankee and Entergy plant. A little bit of background, as I understand it, this is the first merchant plant that is going through the decommissioning process. It's long involved, expensive, and obviously very consequential to Vermont. It's going to cost, by current estimates, $1.242 billion, and that's going to take decades to be accomplished. But there's two recurring issues that I think it's timely to discuss with you, not just because of the implications they have for Vermont, but for this process going forward of decommissioning plants. It's new, and you're going to have to make some critical decisions. The two issues that have emerged in Vermont are, one, public participation, and how extensive will that be, or how limited will it be? And then second are decisions that your commission must make about the use of the decommissioning fund. And there's an inherent conflict to some extent between the merchant generator, in this case Entergy, which wants to put as many costs on that as possible, and the community that wants strict limitations related to managing the radioactive contamination situation. Just a couple of things. And on the question of local community involvement, the nuclear industry is involved through the NEI, as you know. And recently, the Commission had a teleconference that lasted several hours. About 2.5 hours were devoted to hearing from NEI, which was essentially Entergy, and only 20 minutes for the Vermont Public Service Department. We've got a governor who's very engaged, Vermont Public Service Department is very engaged, and of course this community in southern Vermont, it's critical what's going to happen. So the question I have for you, I want to finish with my statement here, is how extensive are you going to allow legitimate public representatives to have a seat at the table? Right now it appears to be almost limited to the public comment period, and I'm sure you read the comments and take those into account. But when there's an actual discussion, having our Attorney General or our Public Service Department that's appointed by our governor, and certainly community representatives from southern Vermont area, is really consequential to considering the decision, getting evidence for the decisions you're going to make. Second, the decommissioning fund. How is that trust fund going to be used? Among the positions advocated by Entergy was to allow for spent fuel management and to store this in dry cask. And they're trying to put, they're also asking for attorney fees to be paid, membership dues, and NEI. And our view is that this should be strictly tied to the purposes that are allowed by the statute. So the two things, as I mentioned, that we're really seeking in Vermont is, one, a seat at the table for legitimate representatives of the community and the state through the Public Service Department, and number two, strict monitoring of in limited uses of the decommissioning fund itself. And then finally, this whole question of Safe Store, which will have a 59-year lifespan minimum, means that site restoration is going to be postponed literally for generations. And there's a real big question as to whether or not we should try to proceed with decommissioning sooner rather than later, in 5 years rather than 60 years. So that's my opportunity to speak to you on something that's of enormous concern to our governor, down to the select boards in the region of southern Vermont where Entergy is exposed. So, Mr. Commissioner, I'll start with you. Thank you all for your service. What can you tell me that I can tell my governor and my select boards about their ability to have a seat at the table in an ongoing way as this decommissioning unfolds?
And you have 5 seconds to do that. No.
But thank you.
Thank you for the question. There are I think what the NRC tries to do is ensure through its part of its oversight program that there are opportunities for public engagement, public information, and the like. There are, and for example, I believe the Attorney General has sought to intervene or raise contentions in proceedings. So in one of our proceedings, particularly, I think actually related to the decommissioning, some of the decommissioning funding issues. So that is a more formal opportunity to participate, and that is a real, to the extent that there are issues that are within the scope of the particular action under consideration, the amendment, the license, or the like. Those are, I think, real opportunities to participate. With respect to Safe Store, our regulations allow for different options for decommissioning, and that includes Safe Store, which is a longer period of, in effect, in situ, if you will, stabilization of the facility until ultimate decommissioning occurs. From the NRC standpoint and the safety standpoint, we believe that that is a safe and a legitimate way to go. And a lot of I think whether other means, for example, a more immediate decommissioning occurs, is probably more a matter of the dialogue between the state and the company itself, because we have found the Safe Store is legitimate.
Well, legitimate, but you understand there's a huge price that the community pays for that. You basically have this very important facility and location, in this case along the banks of the Connecticut River, that essentially cannot be used or developed. And there's an enormous economic impact on a community when it loses the jobs associated with it in nuclear plant. And that's something they're going to have to contend with. And the aspect of your answer that is of some concern to me is, yes, you come to the conclusion that that's safe, but the question I'm asking is, are there other safe ways to do this that don't impose such an ongoing burden on the community where they can't use this resource and redevelop it?
The gentleman's time's close, I mean, way over, but if the chairman would respond.
Essentially, the options are primarily a Safe Store or going to a more immediate decommissioning.
Right.
But again, the NRC, because it has found either of those options to be a safe option, we don't compel one versus the other.
Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The reason I do
no, it's very important to you, I know.
Is that this is going to face all of us who have any kind of nuclear facility, and having a legitimate way for the community to be heard through their representatives, I think, is absolutely essential to the decommissioning process.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, can I take just 10 seconds to add one?
If you take 10 seconds, I got my colleagues who have been waiting patiently.
I just want to make sure that Mr. Welch knows we now have initiated a rulemaking to take a fresh look at a number of these issues, including what is the appropriate role for state and local governments and the public, when is the current level of public participation adequate, and also looking at this question of, right now there are these three options generally for decommissioning, including Safe Store. Is that appropriate, or is that something we should reconsider? We're going to have an advance notice of proposed rulemaking looking at those and other decommissioning issues.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, now I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Flores, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do I get 8.5 minutes too? No,
maybe 9 if you're nice.
I'm just teasing. I want to thank the commissioners for joining us today. I've got a slide I'd like to have up on the screen so we could, please. Thank you. While the slide is coming up, I wanted to talk about macro issues, and that's the overall size and efficiency of the NRC. Look, I am a pro-nuclear person. I think it is the ultimate green fuel. It's the path forward for a low carbon future, particularly when it comes to the generation of baseload electric power. But I have been somewhat concerned about the expansive growth of the NRC to fit what we thought was going to be a growth in nuclear-generated electrical facilities, but it hadn't materialized. But nonetheless, as the agency continued to grow, hopefully this graphic will make it up pretty quickly. And so the growth didn't materialize because of market conditions. Natural gas got very competitive in terms of generation capability, and the and there was some change in the regulatory environment that I think had an impact. If you look at this chart, you'll see that the number of reactors and the number of licensing actions in 2005 was about 1,600 different metrics that the commission was dealing with. Today, there are, you said 99, in 16, I think there's going to be another one come online, so you'll have 100. And then we're down to 900 licensing actions. So the total drop in activity for the NRC is around 38% on a weighted average basis. But the head count has grown by 21% over that time period, and the budget has grown by a whopping 54%. So, I mean, this squarely fits with what Reagan used to talk about when he talked about how the only thing that continues to have an eternal life and to continue growing is a federal agency. So my questions are this, and also some of the things I saw when you provided the document that says, called the NRC Fiscal Year 2016 High-Level Impacts of Further Reduction. The commission talked about these dire things that would happen for just a 3% cut in its budget or a 4 or 5% cut in its budget. I was surprised. Was this document approved by the full commission before it was sent to this committee? Chairman Burge, we'll start with you.
The document, again, I didn't.
The document was entitled NRC FY 2016 High-Level Impacts of Further Reduction. And what it says, it purports to describe anticipated reductions in NRC activities and staffing at various levels of funding reductions. For example, the document claims that a reduction of $30 million, or just 3% of the NRC's current budget, and a reduction of 140 full-time equivalents, which again has grown by 21% over the last 10 years, would result in a long list of severe impacts, including a reduction by 25% in NRC investigations of alleged criminal wrongdoing and termination of the program to supply potassium iodine tablets. So are you familiar with that document?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I think we developed that document, our staff developed that document to give a picture of the impacts of budget levels at different levels. And again, I think as we've tried to discuss here this morning, through Project AIM, through our processes of planning and forecasting out, we're taking steps to be more efficient. We see a longer term, a smaller NRC that talks about 3,754 FTE. The commission has put as a control point at the end of 2016 to be at 3,600 employees. So I think those are responsible steps. What I want to say too is we're looking at that in terms of, I think, the priority of some of the work on it we need to get done. And some of that is working off, for example, licensing backload. And I think our staff has done a great job doing that. So I think we're trying and taking the steps to be a responsible regulator, recognizing the change environment we're in. And we recognize we're going to be smaller on the long term.
Well, I mean, okay. Well, let me give you one example. It says the new reactor's office is budgeted to review 14 applications and is likely to have 9 at most. And so it looks like that the commission's over budgeted in just that one area by $30 million for work that really won't happen in 2016. So that's money that could be used somewhere else to help catch up and not cause all the dire consequences for a 3% cut in the budget. I have other questions, and I'll submit those for the record in the interest of time. Again, I thank you for being here. Look, I want to reiterate, I'm a pro-nuclear person, but we can't have this kind of unregulated growth when the market is saying, hey, we're not there anymore. So thank you.
I want to thank my colleague and appreciate his focus. And now I'd like to turn to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Johnson. But before I do so, he spent his summer being an undercover boss. So I hope the NRC will not allow him to be an undercover boss in a nuclear control room. So
that was on my list.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Hope not.
I wouldn't want to be. I wouldn't want to be. Trust me. Well, thank you, folks, for being with us today. Very, very important things we're discussing. You know, on August 27th of this year, the Commission released the voting record on mitigating strategies for severe accident scenarios. A majority of the Commission voted to exclude severe accident management guidelines, or SAMG, SAMG, from NRC requirements, primarily because SAMGs are not necessary for adequate protection and converting these voluntary industry efforts to a mandatory requirement supported by the kind of quantitative cost-benefit analysis mandated by the backfit rule. Commissioner Ostendorf, in your vote on mitigation strategies, you expressed surprise that the staff decided to include new reactor design requirements as part of their proposal. Your vote explained that, and I quote, "This provision should have been raised to the Commission as a separate matter in advance of the draft proposed rulemaking package," unquote. There were also significant concerns with the staff's reliance on various qualitative factors. So here's the question. Is there a tendency within the staff ranks to perhaps engage in mission creep, to take on activities or make proposals that are beyond the scope of the task that the Commission has assigned the staff? And how does the Commission guard against that tendency?
Thank you for the question. I personally believed, in the context of this vote, that the staff proposal to the Commission for the new reactor piece was outside the scope of what the Commission had previously directed. I would say that that is not a routine occurrence. It's happened just on a rare occasion, but in this case, I disagree with what the staff did, and I wouldn't say called them out in the vote, but I said I did not agree with how the staff approached it in this vote.
Okay.
So but this is not a routine type occurrence by the staff. I'd say it's rarely done. At the same time, we also want to foster an atmosphere at the NRC where the staff feels free to raise their best ideas, recognizing at the end of the day the Commission will make a decision.
Sure.
That's what we did.
I get that. I get that, that this may have been an outlier, but what is the proper role of the Commission in overseeing and directing the work of the NRC staff? Do you think this kind of thing could be prevented?
In this particular case, and again, I think it's a little bit of an anomaly, Congressman, the Commission provides direction via what we call staff requirements memorandum that represent a majority view of the Commission. Mm-hmm. It provides written direction to the staff. I think that process works very, very well. And I'd say, by and large, our staff has been very diligent in complying with the staff requirement memorandums from the Commission. From time to time, there may be a difference of opinion. We don't want to squelch these other ideas. Recognize at the end of the day, the decision rests with the four of us at this table.
Okay. The NRC, folks, has a long list of rulemakings in various stages of development. Will the Commission review all ongoing activities to prioritize and eliminate rulemakings with no safety significant benefit as a part of the Project AIM baselining? Any of you?
We look at the rulemaking in terms of a development process, but one of the, I think we will be looking at in terms of the rebaselining, and there's also what we call an add shed process. You know, if you're going to add new things in, how it helps with in terms of priorities. So we will be looking at that. I think as part of that process. What we're getting from the staff is a proposal for how to do the rebaselining, and which the Commission will act on.
Okay. A 2014 Government Accountability Office report found the NRC had an average annual attrition rate of 5.4% between 2004 and 2012. This equates to nearly 200 NRC staff leaving the organization each year. However, Project AIM has a target of 3,600 staff for fiscal year 2016, a reduction of less than 100 from current staffing levels, and has suggested that only a slow and modest workforce reduction is achievable. So how is the Commission encouraging NRC staff to provide ambitious and achievable recommendations?
With respect to, again, with respect to attrition, attrition, it's not always where you want it, necessarily want it to be. For example, if you have in one area, you know, one of our, I think, challenges is in the administrative area, but not all those who decide to go another job or retire go that way. So what we're trying to do is smartly focus that. We're looking at early outs and buyouts using those authorities in consultation with the Office of Personnel Management. But again, we've set the commission set is the sort of a target point around 3,600 at 3,600 for the end of fiscal year 2016. And again, we hope we smartly can do that. Part of it is when you get some of that attrition, for example, if you have resident inspectors or inspectors attrit, those are things you wanted to replace to keep, you know, the oversight, key oversight aspects available. So it's not as easy sometimes as just the pure drift down from the 5 or 5.4%.
Okay. All right. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Kinzinger, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here and the service that you do. Really appreciate it. You know, given that efficiency is one of the NRC's core values regarding the principles of good regulation on its website, one of which states that the American taxpayer, the rate-paying consumer, and licensees are all entitled to the best possible management and administration of regulatory activities. I have a few questions regarding the budget and rulemaking process at the Commission as things currently stand. As a fee-based agency, your Commission is statutorily required to recover 90% of your budget through the annual collection of fees from licensees. And referring back to the value of efficiency as one of the NRC's principles of good regulation, it's pretty obvious that the need for an established, credible process for developing a budget based on workload projections is necessary to determine responsible fee assessments. Unfortunately, the lack of an effective budget development process has long been an issue. In 2013, the NRC Inspector General found that the Commission had an incomplete implementation of planning, budgeting, and performance management process, and noted that the budget formulation and execution process are not actually aligned. Today, the lack of an effective budget development process is something that's still outstanding, which is why I raised this issue of particular concern through a letter to the GAO. In that letter is a request for the GAO to study and make recommendations on how best to improve the budget process for the NRC. Mr. Chairman, what's the status of the Commission's implementation of a new budget process?
I believe a revised management directive, if it has not been issued, is pending, and I think it was created to address that aspect.
So you think so? It's done? It's fixed?
I need to just consult with our CFO just to confirm.
Okay.
But I believe that was process underway. Whether it is that revised management directive has been issued, I'm just not sure. I'd be happy to provide that for them.
Any other? Go ahead.
Under a standing commission direction, the revision to this budget process will have to be a vote of our commission, and although I believe the chairman is probably reflecting the fact that the staff has prepared something for our consideration, it has not been submitted to us yet.
I would say, Congressman, that we agree that there are some areas for needed improvement in the budget process. Maureen Wiley is our new Chief Financial Officer who was brought into the agency from elsewhere in the federal government. We're very confident under her leadership we'll be able to move forward and make these improvements.
So you all think by 2017 this is going to be the case? We're going to be in good shape on the budget process?
I couldn't.
By 2017, we're going to be good. Hopefully.
I think we will be.
Okay.
I'm
good.
confident.
I like to hear that. The NRC has last updated its management directive governing the long-range planning, budget formulation, and resource management in 1989. Since that time, the organization has seen significant changes both internally and with industry. NRC's inability to update this directive resulted in an inefficient process that complicates the overall effectiveness of the organization. Do you have any idea when the Commission will finalize updating its management directive?
This is the one I was referring to, and Commissioner Seminicki reminded me too, needs to come to the Commission. again, the timing, by the, we expect by the end of the year. Or
Okay.
that would be the objective by the end of the year.
Okay. And so just, I guess, more generally, how can the commission ensure that it's responsible to or responsive to the changing environment of the nuclear regulatory industry?
Well, I let others speak as well, but I think part of it is us listening, engaging with industry, other stakeholders. Some of what I think we've described here today in terms of thinking of the future, in terms of are we going to get new types of applications, being open and hearing what people are thinking, what is on the minds of the industry. I think being responsive in things like the cumulative effects of regulation, that's again a way of us, I think, getting better, doing our work in a more effective way, and still focusing on what at the end of the day is our core mission: safety and security.
Good. All right. Well, I appreciate, again, all your work. I have 4 nuclear power plants in my district, so this is very important to ensure that, these are successful. They provide a lot of power for Illinois, a lot of power for my district, and good paying jobs. So we appreciate the security and safety, but we also appreciate you doing it without unnecessary burden on these fantastic power plants. So with that, I'll yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back his time, and one of the questions I was going to ask, and I'm just going to make a statement, is that when plants get decommissioned, if we don't look at adjusting the rate to pay for the process, the burden can get so high, then you may have unintended consequences. So that's part of the budgetary questions that I think my colleagues were trying to point to. But I want to thank you right off of our break to be able to be in here, sit through 2 subcommittees for as long as you have. We appreciate the work you do. We appreciate the responses you provide to us, and also the work you do for this country. I want to remind you all that the hearing record will remain open for 10 business days. You may receive additional questions submitted for the record. We would ask you respond to any of those questions in 10 business days. And with that, seeing no other members, I'll call this hearing adjourned.
Always there to come in with some extra energy.
2 subcommittees.